Welcome. Have you ever felt like spirituality is this thing you do for maybe a few minutes a day, but it feels totally separate from the rest of your life? Well, what if I told you that you could turn every single moment, every thought, every action into a conscious active connection? That's exactly what we're diving into today, using the timeless wisdom of the Srimad Bhagavatam to learn how to engage our mind, our body, and all our senses in a life of devotion. Okay, so this one line, it's our starting point. And honestly, it's kind of the ultimate goal, too. It translates to the mind should be fixed at the lotus feet of Lord Krishna. Now, that's not just some pretty poetic idea. It's the absolute central pillar of a devotional life. It is the foundation for everything else we're about to talk about. If we can get this one thing right, everything else just naturally starts to fall into place. So, the big question is, how do we actually get that kind of focus? Well, here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at what devotion is really all about. Then, we'll see why the mind is the absolute first place to start. From there, we'll get into engaging our senses and our body. And finally, we'll uncover the qualities that really define the heart of a devotee. Sound good? Let's get started. First up, devotion's true purpose. It's so easy to think of devotion as just a list of things to do, chanting, praying, rituals. But what the Bhagavatam teaches is that real devotion is a completely holistic practice. It's about consciously and actively engaging our entire being, every thought, every action, every sensation in divine service. It's the whole shebang. So where do we even begin with a practice that big? That brings us to part two, the mind. And why here? Well, because the mind is described as the leader, like the general of an army. And that army is all of your senses. Think about it. If you can get the general on your side, the rest of the troops are going to follow right along. And this is where it gets super practical. Engaging the mind isn't some vague, mystical thing. It's about actively choosing what we focus on. We can fill our minds with Krishna's incredible stories. We can think about his beautiful form and qualities. And, this is the key, we can consciously replace our day-to-day anxieties and worries with this powerful remembrance. It's a direct swap. And that's really the bottom line for this whole section. The very first and most critical step on this path is to offer the mind. That's the foundation. Without that, everything else we try to build is just going to be a little shaky. Okay, once the mind is engaged, we can move on to our senses. Now think of your senses as these really powerful gateways. They can either pull us out into the material world, getting us all distracted, or they can become our greatest allies, connecting us to the divine. It's all about which direction we point them. Let's start with a really fascinating one, the tongue. It's got two totally distinct powers, right? Speaking and tasting. So for speaking, we can use it to chant mantras, like the Hare Krishna mantra, or to talk about Kṛṣṇa. That's called Kṛṣṇa. And for tasting, we can decide to only eat food that's first been offered to Krishna. That's a sacred practice we're about to dive into. So what is this food, this Krishna prasada? It's so much more than just blessed food. It's the sacred process of lovingly preparing and offering food to the Lord before we ever take a bite. This act of devotion is said to spiritualize the food, completely transforming it from just, stuff we eat into a tangible form of divine mercy. So why so much focus on just the tongue? Well, get this. The teachings say that the tongue is the most unruly, the most difficult sense to control. So the idea is, if you can master its urges, both for what you say and what you taste, you gain the inner strength to master all the other senses too. It's like the master key that unlocks everything else. And this same exact principle applies to all our other senses. You see the pattern here, right? It's all about conscious replacement. We can fill our ears with spiritual sound, like listening to scripture or sacred music called Kirtana, instead of gossip. We can point our eyes towards sacred images instead of distracting scenes. Even our sense of smell can be engaged by appreciating the fragrance of flowers offered in devotion. Every single sense becomes a tool. And this is why it matters so much. What we let in through these sensory gateways isn't neutral. It actively shapes our inner world. Our feelings, our thoughts, our very consciousness. We get to choose what we consume, and not just with our mouths, but with all of our senses. All right, so we've covered the mind and our senses of perception. But what about our limbs of action? Our hands, our legs? This brings us to part 4, a body for service. This is all about turning our physical work, our very movement, into a form of worship.
And the examples are just so beautifully simple and profound. Our hands aren't just for us. They can be used to clean a sacred space, to cook for the Lord, or to serve others. Our legs can carry us to a temple or on errands for service. When every physical action gets infused with this kind of purpose, it's an incredible way to purify our ego. And this is just such a wonderfully encouraging thought. Every single step, every small action that we do in this mood of service has profound spiritual value. No effort in this direction is ever lost or wasted. And now we've come to our final section, the one that really ties everything together. After we've engaged the mind, the senses, and the body, we arrive at the ultimate purpose of all this practice, cultivating a pure and devoted heart. This is so important. Devotion doesn't mean we have to run away from life. It means we recenter it. It's about offering the results of our work, remembering Him throughout the day, and learning to accept both the good and the bad as coming from a higher source. It's all about connecting everything back to that divine center. And what's the one essential quality that holds all of this together? Humility. This famous teaching, "Be more humble than a blade of grass," shows us that a humble heart is the fertile ground where devotion can actually grow. Without it, the seeds of devotion really struggle to take root. So, what does a great devotee really look like? It's not about performing flashy miracles or making big, grand gestures. It's about character. It's a person who engages their whole being in service, stays humble, depends on a higher power, loves others on the path, and just tries to never forget the Lord, even for a moment. So we've seen how every single part of us can become a tool for devotion. The key isn't to try and do everything all at once, but to simply start somewhere, to make one small, conscious choice. So I'll leave you with this question to think about. To begin your own journey, which sense will you engage first?